A lot of people are asking, myself included, what are the biggest things that we actually learned from Duke's season opening win over Elon? How does that apply to tomorrow's game against Northwestern? And what else is going on with Manny Diaz's program? Let's discuss here today on Locked On Blue Devils.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. It is so great to have you here with us on Thursday, September 5th, 2024. Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop where we discuss everything going on in the life of Duke athletics. And this time of year, it's football season. We're off and running, and this Duke football team is getting set for a big game tomorrow against Northwestern. We still have to unpack some things that we learned from the win against Elon to get the season started, and we'll do that on today's show with our good pal, Conor O'Neill from Devils Illustrated when he joins us on the show. If you have not done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free, wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Also, leave us a 5-star rating and written review. We encourage you to watch the show each and every day on YouTube. Hello to our visual audience there watching the show each and every day. Subscribe to our channel, like this video, share it with your friends, and let us know in the comments down below if you're an everydayer. I love seeing this community build each and every week. And as we get closer to basketball season, I know a lot more engagement will be taking place here on Locked On Blue Devils. We're on X at LO_Blue Devils, and I'm there as well at _JJ_Jackson_. All right, without further ado, here he is, my good pal Conor O'Neill back with us. And we were just talking, Conor. Here we are, a little bit of a routine now that we're jumping back into game week. Coaches are having weekly press conferences to meet with the media. They're on league teleconferences to let you know what's happening with their program and around the league. It's just good to have football back in our lives. The NFL season gets started a little bit later tonight with a fun one between the Chiefs and Ravens. I'm doing well, and I hope that you are too.
Yeah, it's I've told a couple people this. The 3 weeks of fall camp and all preseason football feels like a dead sprint to the opener. And then I'm always kind of I get this annual reminder. I guess I forget it every year too. But then when the season starts, you kind of fall into, you almost have more free time than when the games weren't going on, because when you're covering X amount of practices, you feel like it's almost a game every day. Now it's just one game, and then you write some stuff about it, and then you write some stuff about the next game coming up. So it's good to have a routine every once in a while.
Well, without a doubt it is. And what people are writing about right now is a 1-0 Duke football team, a team that took care of business against an FCS opponent in Elon and picked up the first win for Manny Diaz as the head coach of the Duke Blue Devils. I think it's difficult maybe to leave an imprint on a team, on a program after just one single game that was there. But after a long offseason of wondering what exactly this Manny Diaz era would look like, we got to see it this past week in that win over Elon. Where do you sit on that, like truly identifying what exactly Manny Diaz Duke football sort of looks like?
I think I found out more about my alma mater there than I did about Duke in that game. Hopefully the Phoenix can make the FCS playoffs this year. They had a good conference record last year. They just weren't good in the non-conference.
Yeah.
My biggest takeaway was we spent 8 to 9 months of Manny and defensive coordinator Jonathan Patke telling us how they were going to be an attacking, aggressive style of defense. They wanted to play in the opponent's backfield. They wanted to create TFLs and get opposing offenses behind the chains. All those kind of buzzwords and buzz phrases that go along with piling up sacks and TFLs. And it all sounds good. You want to see it come together when it's actually another opponent lined up from you instead of your own offense. And I mean, I don't know how much more you want than 8 sacks and 16 TFLs. The TFLs number was a first time since 2007 stat. I think the sacks were first time since 2009, if I have that correct. First time in a while. So it was impressive. And this is where I've had to write around this a little bit. You can caveat and asterisk every FCS game you want. It's a different level of competition, especially when you're talking about FCS versus Power 4 conference team. but they're still scholarship guys. They're still like Division I college football players. And you have an FCS game every year, and Duke hasn't reached those numbers of sacks and TFLs. Like other teams in the country don't have those numbers. Duke is the only team in the country with 8 sacks through 1 or 2 games. Some of the ones with 2 games played haven't gotten there yet.
There you go.
It was everything that was the defense was billed to be. It was. And that's not saying it's going to be that for the next 11 games, but it's 1 for 1 on capitalizing on what we were told they would be and what they were.
Yeah, you deliver a mission statement, so to speak, like this is what we're going to be on the defensive side of the ball. And within 1 game, it's very clear that, yeah, that's going to be a point of emphasis. Now people start to say, well, it was Elon. It was an FCS opponent. And fair, this is just a better conversation to have than, oh, wow, look how many yards Elon was able to pile up against the Duke defense or something like that.
Yeah, it's a lot easier of a conversation to have. I think that 8 sacks and 16 TFLs are not going to be repeated this year in any game. But I do think they gave you, to use the word you just used, they gave you a blueprint of what they want to do. Like that's what it's going to look like no matter who the opponent is. If it goes to plan, it's going to be, a big 3rd down sack to erase any chance that you're giving up a long pass play. The interesting part to see if it'll play out against better competition is if some of these high reward plays all of a sudden turn into high risk plays. And that was one of the things we talked to Manny about this week in his press conference on Monday was, you would think that a defense as aggressive as Duke's was in game 1 and as aggressive as the defenses at Penn State and Texas, is it Texas Southern?
Yep.
Or Texas, I get Texas Southern and Texas State.
Texas State. Yeah.
Yeah. Texas State. Those two, they didn't give up all those explosive plays that you think they would have. Now Texas State did give up, I know Jordan knows the number off the top of his head, and I forget it from time to time. Texas State gave up a lot of points. Penn State did not. Penn State was, I think, 2 or 3 in the country in scoring defense last year. But what we're going to have to see over the rest of the season is whether they do start giving up the chunk plays, because they're going to be playing a quarterback who's maybe more mobile than Matthew Downing was of Elon. They're going to be playing some receivers that are a little more explosive and can create separation quicker in routes. And so the ball's going to be coming out of there before Duke's defensive lineman can get home for a sack. That kind of thing is, that's what we're going to have to watch. And that's kind of the fun of seeing a football season develop is, you have this baseline of what you did against the FCS team. Now, what does it look like against a Big Ten team?
That's the big question that we get to have answered tomorrow for this Duke football team. We got to talk a little bit about the offense as well. What did we learn? What can improve for this Duke football team in particular? And we'll answer those questions with Conor O'Neill after we take break number 1 here on today's show. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season is here. It's back tonight. The reigning Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs host the Baltimore Ravens, a Super Bowl celebration, and then a kickoff of the new season. Remember this time last year, Kansas City dropped a game against the Detroit Lions in their Super Bowl victory first game last season, and still were able to turn it into a Super Bowl season. Can they do that again tonight? Kansas City right now on FanDuel favored by 3. You've heard us talk so much about America's #1 sports book. We've got something awesome for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. If that's not enough, FanDuel also has something special for our listeners this weekend. Be sure to check out FanDuel's Profit Boost in the app and use it for FanDuel's Double Your Winnings for all Sunday, September 8th, pregame moneyline bets. Profit Boost will be live starting tomorrow. View your account page now to learn more about your boost. A lot of awesome things happening over at FanDuel. So just visit FanDuel.com and go ahead and download America's #1 sports book. Conor O'Neill's here with us. We're moving forward today with this program. We're talking about Duke's win against Elon, what it says for the rest of the season, what it says that going into the game against Northwestern. Been positive throughout the week, have pointed out some areas of improvement as well. Let's start with the latter right there. You look at Duke's offense against Elon. Simple question. Why couldn't they run the ball? Why was the ground game not able to get going?
So it's something I was joking with Jim Sumner, doing a Substack, Jim Sumner on Duke. Look, I think I know a lot about football. I don't know enough about football to sit there after a game and tell you Elon was stacking the box and what their defensive alignment was doing to Duke's run game and where the matchups were that Duke was taking advantage of. So I'm going to take Manny Diaz at his word. I didn't get a chance to go back and rewatch Duke's game, but I'm going to take Manny at his word when he tells us that the looks that Elon was giving Duke were tough run boxes. Like they were just basically trying to jam that thing in there. Like they were trying to get 2 or 3 yards at a time where they could, but a lot more of the matchup advantages and a lot more of where the defense was telling you where to go with the football was through the air. And that was through screen passes. That's part of why Malik Murphy was 23 of 23, which is an insane number. No matter the provision, like he was 23 of 23 throwing behind the line of scrimmage or less than 10 yards down the field. So everything short was a completion, which is great. If you incomplete those, then you're all of a sudden behind the chains because you're losing yardage basically on an incompletion where you have that little of a downfield throw. The challenge with Northwestern is they don't do what Elon does. They will kind of parachute out the defense. They will make it so that you want to run against their defensive look that they're giving you because they have confidence in their defensive linemen and linebackers that they can shed blocks quickly and get off of those and still make a tackle when the running back is within a couple yards of the line of scrimmage or even behind the line of scrimmage. So that's kind of what I wrote my preview about at Devils Illustrated today is Duke is going to get some of those looks to where they can run the ball. Like everything about offensive football these days is read options, but it's also pre-snap reads where quarterback is looking at a safety or a linebacker or a nickel, determining where he is in the formation. So I think Duke can have more success. I don't think it's, you take game one against the FCS team and say, oh, we only ran for 59 yards. We're going to be an awful rushing offense all year. Malik Murphy's going to have to throw for 300 plus every game for us to win. I don't think it's that yet. It might be maybe, but let's hold off on that for now. Let's let the offensive line come together a little bit more. And let's see how they can attack Northwestern.
Yeah, I mean, a one-game sample size isn't fair to kind of jump to major conclusions. But look, we're filling time here. We want to give people kind of content and thoughts to have in regards to this Duke football team. And so that angle, that perspective, and how Elon was defending sort of the Duke offensive attack from offensive coordinator Jonathan Brewer is certainly interesting. Like if these things are open, if Malik Murphy is in a rhythm, why run the ball when we're able to kind of move it effectively that way? Forget how ineffective he may or may not have been kind of beyond the 10 yards.
Yeah, and it's interesting to hear Duke talk about the way they count those short passes because and this is kind of the air raid spread offense principle. Sometimes a running play is when the ball comes out of Malik Murphy's hand and it goes to Quayshawn Brown or Jordan Moore, or somebody that can make things happen in space, Samir Hagans. And if they pick up 3 to 5 yards on a 1st and 10, that's as good as a run in almost every situation. Like there is, you have a little bit more of an explosive play factor if you get the ball on the outside and you have a receiver who's maybe a little more elusive than running backs. I feel like it's not disrespectful to say those guys I mentioned at receiver are they've got a little more sizzle and jukes in their game than Jaquez Moore does and Star Thomas. All due respect to those guys. But that's a running play. it just goes in the stat book as a pass. And that's why I shiver when in the Monday presser when Manny and Jonathan Brewer asked about the run pass discrepancy, and it's kind of like what you look at the stat sheet, and I'm just grabbing numbers off the top of my head. You look at the stat sheet and you see Malik Murphy threw 40 passes.
Yep.
And Duke had maybe 24 or 26 rushing attempts. Maybe it got up to 30 with that last drive they had, but they don't look at it as that kind of split. They look at it maybe as Malik Murphy threw the ball 33 times, actually like called pass plays, and then 7 of them were these screens that are just
in that run department. Yeah.
Yeah. So it all ties into the bigger conversation of how we talk about modern day football and how different it is and how it's an evolving game, and the way we track stats and traditional stats is not caught up to where the game is. And it's just something that we kind of have to change the way we talk about it and the way we track these things. But yeah, I mean, it's a little more finicky, and there's a lot more nuance to stats than what Duke showed.
Keep talking quarterback with me here. Malik Murphy debuts as the Duke quarterback. He's a guy we talked about all offseason after he makes the big decision to leave Texas, a team that was set to compete in the college football playoff, and comes to Durham. Within the last 48 hours, Duke has released a mic'd up video of Malik Murphy from his debut there, and got to see a little bit of his personality and how excited he was having on the field. The few times you've already gotten the opportunity to be around him, to interview him, and that sort of thing, Conor, tell us about the guy. What has stood out to you about Duke's new quarterback?
I very much enjoyed the behind the mic thing, and it was very evident, I thought, to see why he's played one game at Duke. He's been there 9 months. He was voted a captain. And I think you can see why, where he's encouraging guys constantly. You know, in a 3-minute mic'd up clip, you're not getting everything, obviously, sure. But every snippet you saw, not everyone, but most of those were positive encouragement. It was reinforcement. The best thing I saw was him looking at the iPad on the sideline and telling Henry Beelan, you know, hey, look at this safety. Look where he is. He's dropping here. This is why we went here. Like that. I mean, that's invaluable stuff. He kind of exudes QB1 vibes, for lack of a better term. We didn't get to talk to him in the spring until after the spring game. So I had a larger first impression of him as a quarterback than I did as a person initially. And then that first time we talked to him, he just you got the sense that you were talking to a guy who's very, very comfortable in his own skin. And it should go without saying, like, that's what you kind of need out of a quarterback. You don't need a guy who's in a shell. You don't need a guy who's going to kind of turtle up. There's all kinds of different leadership styles, and they work for different guys. They work for different personalities. But I'm a pretty firm believer that if you're playing quarterback for a power conference football team, you need to have some vocality about you. I don't know if that's a word. I might have just made that up.
You're on a roll here. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you've just gotta get the confidence. One of my dad's favorite terms is athletic arrogance. You've got to have that to an extent. And he has it, and then some, I think. And look, it might get him burned. We might have a game in a month or two where we're talking about he has way too much faith in his arm, and that's why he threw 3 interceptions and cost Duke a game. That's the double-edged sword of it.
Very real, yeah.
But right now, we can talk about how much of a leader he is, how much confidence he exudes, and how much of a positive that is for Duke.
Yeah, it's now going in my vocabulary now, Conor, that I don't want a quarterback who turtles up. I love that. Don't want a turtled up quarterback. That's perfect. It makes sense, though. We're going to run with that for sure. All right.
Don't take it as a shot at Maryland, because I did grow up a Maryland fan.
Yeah, I'll stay away from that. That's for sure. All right, let's take one more timeout. When we come back, Northwestern is the next opponent for the Duke Blue Devils. What do they look like? What can we expect? That's next. Locked On Blue Devils here today, brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn. These days, we know how important hiring for your small business can be, and you want to make sure that you find quality professionals that are right for the role. You've got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. It helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you are looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Okay, Duke's back in action. Another Friday night contest, this time on the road against Northwestern out of the Big Ten. They barely squeaked past Miami of Ohio to earn their first victory of the season. Our friends at FanDuel right now have Northwestern favored by 2. So you look at this game, what do you think? Tell us a little bit about this Northwestern squad, Conor.
Well, the first thing my mind goes to is this is probably the most unique college football viewing experience there is in the country this year. I watched a decent portion of the game against Miami, Ohio. I think it was in the same window as Miami, Florida, and we know that one wasn't worth watching after a certain point.
Yep.
It's a temporary stadium. They knocked down the stadium where Duke won 2 years ago, and I think it won a couple other times before then. And they're building a new stadium on that same spot, so they can't play in the middle of a construction zone with hard hats on. So they've got a temporary setup. I think the attendance last week was like 12,000, but there might have been several hundred others out on boats on Lake Michigan watching because that it was that close to the lake there. I've only been to Chicago twice, and once was just to fly in and drive to South Bend and cover a football game and then drive back and fly out of Chicago. And the other time I was in Chicago, it was when I was like 12, but I might be prisoner a little bit of not being all that familiar and having just this kind of idea that it's never not windy in Chicago. I just go by the name of the city, right?
The Windy City. Yep.
I just think that a nighttime game, even though I think the forecast calls for only like 15-mile-an-hour winds, it just feels like the wind is going to whip off that lake and it's going to swirl. And I always think that wind is more damaging to football scores than rain is, because if you want to throw the ball downfield, we know Duke wants to get the ball vertical and get the ball in the air for a long time. That tells me that a lot of balls are going to be hanging in the air for longer than you think they should be, and they're going to be going in places that are not necessarily where they're supposed to go. That's why I kind of think it's so imperative for Duke to run the ball well in this game. They've got to sustain drives because of the wind factor and because it's kind of what Northwestern makes you do. Like, they are not going to give up 40 and 50-yard plays like Duke was able to hit a couple of those against Elon. I think against Northwestern, and like the stereotype goes for most Big Ten teams, you're going to have to work your way down the field. Like, they're not going to let you hit them for any 3-play touchdown drives, or they're at least not going to do it consistently. So this is going to be a game that Duke is, sometimes cliches are cliches because they're true. Like, this is going to be a hard-nosed Big Ten grinded out type of game where I don't think the winning score is going to be in the 30s.
I'm ready to see it all unfold. I think it's going to be a great game between the two teams. Friday night football once again, and then we'll get a little bit more to that traditional Saturday affairs for Duke on the gridiron starting next week with UConn. Conor, you've got a preview up right now on your website about this Duke and Northwestern game. How can people access that? How can we best support the work that you do at Devils Illustrated?
Yeah, go sign up, duke.rivals.com. I mean, sometimes when you ask me about this over the summer, I'm kind of struggling to tell you when new content is coming or what fresh content is up, but it's not going to be the case for the next several months. I mean, we've got basketball recruiting. Duke is still yet without a commitment. We'll have basketball preseason, and then football's rolling right along. I think I've got 4 or 5 fresh stories up, a Q&A with the Northwestern beat reporter to fill you in on all the gaps about them. I mean, there's a ton of content there at Devils Illustrated.
Go check it all out. Really excited to see this game unfold and support Conor with the work that he does. Good to see you again on the show today, man. Thanks for stopping by.
Awesome. Thanks, JJ.
All right, that's Conor O'Neill. He's joining us on the program. Go support his work. Once again, duke.rivals.com. That's going to do it for today's show. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to the podcast feed, and leave us a 5-star rating and written review. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.